Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Sharpening the Saw, powered by Skills Hack. Thank you, everyone, for joining us with today. Our topic for discussion is incredibly pertinent and vital for the growth and sustainability of any organization. Succession planning and leadership development are the cornerstones of maintaining a robust leadership pipeline and ensuring seamless transitions. Before we dive into the discussion, I'd like to introduce our esteemed speakers for the evening. First, we have Dr. Brilliant SK. He is the EVP and Chief People Officer and Head of Places and Processes at TimesPro. With 27 years of experience in human resources, Brilliant is passionate about empowering and enabling learners and leaders in the education sector. He is a lifelong learner and experience collector, always looking for new opportunities to grow and make a difference. Welcome, Brilliant.
Thank you, Shagun. My pleasure.
Next, I'm delighted to introduce our host for today, Ms. Nilakshi Mukherjee. Nilakshi is a leadership coach and trainer with over 24 years of experience in the field of HR. She is dedicated to developing robust strategies for organizations in transformational HR, bringing value to businesses with the expertise in situational and adaptive styles of leadership. Welcome, Nilakshi.
Hi, Shalom. Hi, Brilliant.
Hi,
Thank
Nilakshi.
you. Thank you for that wonderfully warm introduction, Shagun, and also for setting a context to what we're going to talk about today. So thank you very much. And a big thank you to everybody who's joining here today on a Friday evening, especially you, Brilliant. My heartfelt thanks to you to have made time on a Friday, 7 p.m. And that really kind of reflects the investment that Shagun just spoke about in terms of learning, in terms of teaching, in terms of investing time in the larger fraternity. That just goes to show your investment towards that. So thank you ever so much for having made your time. And again, a heartfelt thanks to everybody for making it today. So, in the last 4 or 5 years, I think, Brilliant, Shagun, and for the rest of the audience, I think there is not much left to say about the relevance and the pertinence of constant change, right?
Absolutely.
About constant change, about our ability, undying ability to be able to meet these changes with an absolutely agile mindset, with an absolutely agile thought process, and etc., right? So VUCA is the constant now. So with
Yeah.
VUCA being the constant now, Brilliant, and I think in large organizations such as yours, you might be looking at various spectrums of how VUCA really impacts your life. And which is where I would want to take a step back, Brilliant, and ruminate on why or how does succession planning really form a part in terms of increasing our agility as an organization, as leaders, or as HR functions at large, right? So let's take a step back, and I would want to really spend some time on thinking as to why is succession planning an incredibly important part of this.
Thanks, Nilakshi, for this. And I think, it's becoming too cliched, and I would say we use too many jargons, VUCA, Bani, and I would add one more to say fear, FEAR. And
Yeah.
that fear is frustration, excitement, anxiety, and rage. If you look at how the world is changing, all of this has now become an integral part of how we live life in the corporate world. It's all about agility, adaptability, if we were to look at it. And the organizations which have seen success in even the smallest form are the organizations which were able to quickly adapt and be very agile. One of the
True.
elements to that is succession planning, because if you don't have that part stitched in, it
Mm.
becomes very difficult. Now, look at ways and means of mitigating risk, right? If you have a strong succession planning in the organization, beyond just the framework, I think you are mitigating risk to a larger, extent.
Mm.
Today, good old days, we used to be asked, what would you want to be, a doctor or an engineer? Today the asks are very different, and today it's all about multi-skilling. It's all about trying to do a lot of things. Gone are the days when people used to say jack of all trades, master of none. Now it needs to be master of few, if not one.
Mm,
It's becoming so critical that diverse skill sets are required. And unless you have a kind of a structure, and coming from the HR background, I would say most of us end up with a challenge when it may sound cliched, but it would be like you need a mix of Aishwarya Rai, Sunny Leone, Lalita Pawar, all put into one. That cannot happen, which means we will have to adapt ourselves and we need to
mm,
think differently, which means working beyond just the linear way of working. It's about
mm,
navigating the ambiguity. To
mm,
unless and
mm,
until you create that as a part of your ecosystem, as a part of your culture and DNA in the organization, it will not work.
mm.
Today, if we look at the market, we keep saying that jobs are not available. On the other side, when we hire, we are not finding talent. So there is
Talent
a
is not
talent
available.
short. There is a talent shortage, and it's like dimag ki batti gul moment where if
Yes,
someone says that jobs nahi hai, if someone says applicants nahi hai, so there is something which is missing. And as
that's
an
right.
organization to build that competitive advantage, I think it's critical, and as rightly put, the sharpening of the saw,
Mm.
what Stephen Covey had mentioned, starts with looking inside, and that's where organizations are, now investing. And I think for us also, that's something which is bearing a lot of fruits. We have seen not vertical growths, but we have seen horizontal growths where people have started off somewhere else, and today they are in a different function altogether, leading
That's right.
businesses.
That's
and
right.
that's
That's
and
true.
that's the way to go. So I think it's not just critical, I would say it's now essential to think beyond the VUCA, Bani, and the fear acronyms that we keep creating. Acronyms will come and go, but what's important is how do we tide over all of those challenges.
You know,
Thanks for that.
you're right. The way you said that, the acronyms will come and go, but the state of uncertainty is here to stay,
Stay.
right? You can
Absolutely.
call it in whichever way that you want to call it and give it those fancy names, but that state of uncertainty is here to stay. And I picked up something important that you were speaking while you were, setting the context about skilling, right? And and skilling can be obviously at various levels, right? There would be a starter level skilling, there would be a mid level skilling, and there would be a higher level enabling, whichever way you might want to look at it. So when we talk of skilling, and then we dovetail that with succession planning, right? And now I'm coming up from skilling to enabling, the mid managerial level, the top managerial level, right? Where really the succession planning story begins. How do you think leadership development, right, capability development within the leaders? It is given that it's important, but how do you think organizations are adapting themselves to a continuous learning process for their leaders? Because succession planning will only be successful at a certain level if that enabling is happening with the levels which are to take up the next roles, right? So you can keep a perspective of your organization. You have enough industry friends to understand what's going on within, the industry framework. So, how do you think organizations are adapting themselves towards enabling their levels to be able to take up different roles?
It's typically a catch-22 situation because it's the chicken
Ah.
or egg story.
Mm,
But let's think about how we are trying to deal with it. And I would not say we have arrived or we are there, but we have
mm,
started off with an exercise to create the nine-box framework for our team, trying to
right.
look at performance and potential and assess where it is. When we think about skills, we tend to get, I would say, too sticky about technical or functional skills, but there are
Yeah,
so many aspects beyond that which a leader needs to have. And
that's right.
today, what I have seen, today in the sense, in the recent, I would say, a year or so, there are so many exceptional people who were moved into a role with an anticipation that they would take up more responsibility, become a leader. The biggest area where they failed was people management. The people
Yes.
management skill was so, I don't want to use the word pathetic, but so poor that it put us into a shock. And then the person comes back and tells me, you know what? I can do everything, but don't give me people management. And now that's a trick question for HR to manage. How do we do it? So when we think about skills and competencies, I would say we should think beyond the typical categories of functional skills or technical skills or even business acumen, because those are like the foundational aspects that you need to
Those are
have.
must-haves today, I think.
Yeah, I think if people are saying that those are the things that you're looking at, then I think you're failing at the first step itself.
The first step
So
itself.
that's the foundation for you. Think about how you can build, and again, there is no right answer or a one program fits everyone solution, but how do you build skills of leadership, which includes inspiring people? How do you become a
Mm,
coach? Now, coaching is such a fantastic aspect. Very few leaders understand coaching, mentoring, both elements, right? They
that's right.
tend to get into micromanagement, unfortunately, in
Mm.
the name or in the garb of coaching. One aspect which I feel as a skill, even World Economic Forum had said that it's one of the must-have skills for 2025 and beyond, is problem solving and decision making. How
That's right.
quickly can you take decisions? Leadership needs decision, and decisions
Absolutely.
needs agility. It cannot be that, you'll say, ठीक है मैं सोच के बताता हूँ.
Mm,
No,
mm,
it's immediate here and now. How do you tackle it? And that
mm.
brings us to one aspect which none of the business schools teach us, which is how do I manage to navigate ambiguity, right? And you cannot create a situation which is ambiguous. I mean,
What
eh,
is my jugaad aptitude, you know? How
yeah,
much can I do jugaad in certain situations? Yeah,
exactly.
put in a layman's language.
True.
I think that's become an ability now, right? I mean, you
Yes,
have to
it's a
develop that
must have.
ability. Yeah,
It's a
correct,
must have
correct.
because honestly speaking, if I am looking at building my team, I would not want to spend too much time investing in handholding. I'll say, ठीक है, थोड़ी देर के लिए I'll just be with you. I'll spend some time. The circumstances are changing, the environment is changing, the governmental policies are changing, regulations are changing, and the best of the best plans that have been laid out have gone for a toss.
Mm,
COVID-19 is a great example, right? What happened? We were not really ready, but still
mm,
we managed to get there. But what was important is how do we manage that? And I think that's one of the aspects which today's leaders should have. While organization will continue to talk about aspects which include people management, all of that, it's a given. But beyond
mm.
that, some of these elements of motivating people, being a coach, taking those decisions, and navigating ambiguity are some of the skills which I believe are much essential, irrespective
Mm.
of what kind of an acronym we use for the world we live in.
Sure, sure, sure. Yes, and very pertinent points there, brilliant. And I would want to kind of stretch our imaginations a little on that in terms of, what do we do then, right? I mean, these are a lot of things said, but then what do we do? How do we execute? Because brilliance lies in execution, right? How much are you being able to actually execute in a continuous and structured manner so that you take it to the end? So coming to that, Brilliant, again, maybe pieces from your organization or pieces from the environment that you are kind of striving in. Tell me what as per you, let's talk as per you first. As per you, what do you think are the most effective tools, and now I'm talking about tools and processes, which can create a very enabling culture within an organization, which can enable learning, which can enable agile thinking, which can enable empowerment, right? So what are the tools that you think culturally will align organizations to these values to make it, more agile, for a lack of a better word?
And I think, Neelakshi, one of the aspects that most organizations by default rely on, and we to do that, is performance, right?
Yeah.
Performance reviews, which play a critical role. However,
Hmm.
I would say there is a challenge in that because it gets so subjective that it's based on how Nilakshi feels about Brilliant that he would be maybe the iPod in my organization. Whereas in reality, if I do an assessment, maybe that person will not feature anywhere in the grid. How do we break that and create, I would say, objective performance assessments, bring
Hmm.
in an element of potential? When we were working on that nine box grid, the biggest challenge was about identifying potential.
Potential.
And trust me,
Absolutely.
there's no way, right? how do I say, okay, this person has potential, this person comes with a growth mindset. So there is a lot of subjectivity which comes in, which makes it difficult for me to think
Mm.
about actions. And when we think of tools, we need to make some decisions. How do we look at it?
Yes.
We could bring in competency assessments, but again, there is still an element of subjectivity that comes in. There is no single tool which gives you 100% assessment to say this is where the person is. But what's
Mm.
worked for us is informal reviews and assessments from not just managers but also
Mhm.
from peers.
Right.
It takes me back to my good old software development days when we were working on a project called as BASPAC, Boss,
Mhm.
Associate, Superior, and Peer, which is the
Mhm.
360-degree
This is a
assessment that we
360
talk of.
degree. That's right.
The 360 assessment. But 360 is a problem. It takes
Mm.
up a lot of time. But can we break it down to look at what are the key influencers at this point of time? And I would say
Mhm.
the immediate ones would be the peers because they are observing you more than anyone else. And
Mm.
that's a super solid. And most of the time, yes, everything has to be taken with a pinch of salt. But most of the times, 80%, 80-20 rule, right? Pareto principle will apply.
Mm.
We take that and say, okay, this is coming in. This person fits into this grid.
Mm. Mm.
One
Mm.
thing which we've also tried and we never attempted it earlier was to
Okay.
try and give a leadership assessment test to understand what kind of a leadership the person
Fantastic.
has.
Mm.
We did attempt the strengths finder with Gallup. Unfortunately, the moment we started off with that program, COVID stuck, and then the program itself went into the back burner mode. But I think
Mm.
it's really essential for organizations to think beyond the standard structures and look at strengths, look at capabilities that could be built in. And tools, we can create thousands of them. But I think if you have the right kind of performance assessment metrics, if you have the right kind of feedback mechanism, especially with their managers and the peer ecosystem,
Yes. Mhm.
and most important tests, which could be maybe a strengths finder for all that you want to know, it helps, right? Uh, Every
No,
organization will
absolutely.
find success
Absolutely.
differently.
Yeah, sure. When you were talking about tools and when you were talking about, these assessments, etc. So there's a funny thing which I just remembered, and I usually like doing a bit of storytelling in sessions like these. So, and this is not really a story, but this is just a snippet from one of my experiences that I had with a few people. So every time, so we run psychometric assessments, right? And we within People First also run psychometric assessments before we do any program, right? Now, there have been multiple coaching sessions I've had, brilliant, with the same participants who've had a certain psychometric assessment, who come back and tell me, but Meenakshi, I really don't agree with.
Yeah.
I said, okay, you don't agree with what? You don't agree with your own inputs? What don't you agree with? So he's like, yeah, but you know what? I was possibly in a state of mind. I said, yes, and that state of mind is reflecting when
Yeah,
you are at work. That is
absolutely.
exactly why we are imbibing from that, right? And that works beautifully. That's a huge blind spot cleaner for a lot of people. That yes, that is the
Absolutely.
state of mind that we're trying to identify. So again, pulling a page from what you were talking about, Brilliant, about yes, we can build a lot of tools. Yes, we can do a bouquet of services to be able to assess potential. Now, today, since there is no way that I can skip this question, so I have to bring this question up here.
Sure.
We are living in this world of technology, right? And we have
Absolutely.
people vouching for the unbiased spectrum that AI can get. Now, do you have you guys dabbled with understanding how technology can be utilized in talent management in large, and of course in succession planning in parts, to make it more robust, unbiased, continuous? Do you think technology and AI can be used to drive these three things?
Absolutely. And one of the answers lies in your question itself is reduction of bias, right? One of the biggest thing that we face as HR professionals is the fact that we always see there is a bias that comes in when you do that kind of an assessment. But beyond
Hmm.
that, I would say The biggest advantage that we as HR professionals should be looking at from both an AI perspective and a technology perspective is how do I glean insights from the vast data lake that exists today? We don't need to be restricting ourselves to saying, okay, last 2 saal ka performance dekho or we move forward.
Absolutely.
We may want to look at history,
Very
maybe,
important point. Yes.
create some kind of a mechanism where we get to know how the person has been. As I mentioned, the informal feedbacks that I've collected from the peers and managers, put it into an ecosystem that, when required at the click of a button, can give you a summary of how it is for that person. The,
Hmm.
the challenge, what we see in Ilakshi today is most organizations venture into creating programs, rolling it out, they tom-tom about it, but I am not very sure about the success ratio, right?
Hmm.
How do I measure success without bringing in that human bias or saying, "हाँ ये तो हो गया successful." How is it successful? Because so many people took it. Right? When we think of succession planning, the biggest mistake that most of us end up doing is we assume that it's the number of participants in that program that is a
That defines
success.
the efficacy of the program.
Right.
Yes.
I
Hmm.
would say move beyond that. If you truly want to make a difference, think about how many have actually moved from that succession plan to be successful. Even if
Absolutely.
that is one person in that cohort that you planned for, it's a great success. There is a fantastic old company story which went out long, long ago. Can't name the company right now. This company had a fantastic succession plan. Everything was defined, and it
Mhm.
was like, we knew who the person would be who would succeed. But when the
Mhm.
time came, there was someone from outside who was brought in, and everyone was in shock, and
Hmm.
there was no justification, no reasoning. And
Hmm.
what happens is, in such a scenario, the person who was identified to succeed uh, automatically felt out of place and then moved out of the organization, found success elsewhere. So it's critical that we move beyond the dependency on human beings. We
Hmm.
leverage technology effectively because it also gives us a sense of at risk staff, right? So today,
That's right.
if
Which are
I
those
have been,
critical roles that you're really talking about? Yes,
yes,
of course.
and if I have been investing in a person who's supposed to be succeeding XYZ role, and
Hmm.
nothing has happened for the last 18 months or 19 months, either in terms of an investment in development or any kind of plans, the person will obviously feel dismayed and leave the organization. So it's
Hmm.
critical to get to that level to say, you know what, I'm just, taking a look at the screen and saying, let's say Shagun had been identified for this, but it's been 18 months that we have not done something about it. And
That's
that's
right.
where technology and AI can start throwing those insights for us to make life
Exactly.
easy rather than one
Hmm.
person sitting and assessing saying, Acha, iska batao. We should, we should definitely look at technology to
Certainly.
help on that.
Yeah, and I think, whenever we say, okay, these are my elements, right? This is the performance, this is the psychometry of this person, right? This is an assessment development center done by so and this is what they say. Put all of that together, then automatically you start eliminating bias and eliminating the human factor into it, right? And getting a very robust output of various components, a 360-degree probably. So
True.
how do you put those various components together and get it to an output which would, I mean, I would say largely, at least by 90%, be unbiased. And that's a beautiful role that technology can take
Help us.
in today's day. But now let me go to the other end of the spectrum, right? So here we have technology enabling us and technology giving us our feeds. We have our tools in place. But what is the most important, I feel, Brilliant, is my company culture aligned to it,
Yeah,
right? When I'm talking strategy at the 50,000 feet above the ground level, am I am I committed and am I invested to this thought process that I would grow my people and let them take up other roles? And this is again an offshoot of the example that you were giving, right? That here was this person, he was getting ready for a particular role, and last minute somebody else comes in. That talks a lot. There might be reasons, and we're not even getting there, but that talks a lot about the investment of the top management who is driving culture within the
true.
organization as to what is their commitment towards that and what is their investment towards that. So, how do you think culturally organizations really need to step up to be able to, kind of feed some of these things?
It may sound a bit cliched, but it starts with what Vidya Balan had said, EEE, right? Entertainment, 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 change to communication, communication, communication.
Absolutely.
I think the biggest problem today is we fail to communicate both levels. I would say, uh, we love to see those, are you in the list? But we should also think about, you are not in the list, so here's what you need to do to be in the
Yes,
list. And
exactly.
that's where the culture of the organization will stand out, because it's
Mm.
not just about the people who have been identified, but also potential future aspirationally. How do I look at it? And that
Mm.
requires the organization to start thinking from a larger perspective. One is, what are those key roles or critical roles which I need to fill in? And
Shagun, may we request
Maggie, Maggie's iPhone to be on mute, please. Yeah, thank you.
thank you so much.
As we were sharing food for thought, it aptly happened, Maggie, and I was like, okay, 2 minutes. No,
No,
jokes
sure.
apart, it's important to identify what are those key roles or critical roles that
Yes.
need to have succession. And my thought process is slightly different from what others would say. I would say, don't just plan for one. I need to say, if this person moves up, how do I
Absolutely.
get someone else in the next level? What we tend to
Mhm.
do is we tend to only look at the level which is the
Particular
most
level,
critical.
the
Yeah.
criticality of that level.
And
Yes.
let's say this person moves up, then there is a gap and a void that is created. And that talks about the organization. That talks
Mm.
about the culture, which says that everyone has a ladder to climb on. And
Mm.
this is where having a kind of skills matrix will help to know
Mm.
what are the skills, who can move in there. It's a jigsaw puzzle, right? Oh, this piece is here, you move it. And in a literal sense, it's that when you start looking at the overall organization
Absolutely.
and talent,
Absolutely. Mm. Mm.
until and unless and I use this unique, YOUNIQUE, which means it's you, your company, your plan.
Oh,
No one
yes. Oh,
else
yes.
can replicate it. It
Mm.
needs to be specific. It cannot be, oh, Nilakshi has done this, let me copy it here. It will not work. You will never be successful. So understand
Mm.
what your organizational bhag is, right? Big, hairy, audacious goals, uh, which can drive you to achieve those. And many a
Mm.
times, we should also be clear that at the given point of time, I may not have anyone. It's fine. If you
Yes, of
want to
course.
build it, think about targeted development. Instead of saying, koi nahi hai, chalo dekhenge baad mein. I would say, try to get there and say, let's target 4 or 5 people for a start. What is the
Mm.
worst that will happen, right? Worst is they may not get there,
They may
but
not step up.
they may
That's all
not step
right.
up.
Yes.
Yeah, but at least you created a culture to say that I am there to identify aapki parki nazar or nirma super. So you you are there to identify people and build it up. If it doesn't work, it's okay. Plan,
Mm.
move it,
Mhm.
change. It's the PDCH cycle of the software that we talk about. Plan, do, check, and act. When your
That's right.
checks are failing, rework on it. It's
Mm.
perfectly fine. But the biggest thing that comes in terms of succession planning or leadership development across is the senior leadership buy-in.
Yes.
I mean,
Which is where we
it
started. That
yeah,
culturally, how aligned are we from the
it
top?
cannot be lip service, right?
Mm.
मेरे यहाँ पे ये कर दो, ये कर दो. We see a lot of people. Sorry to use this, but many people put up certificates saying that I'm certified by this, against this. So many certifications, but in reality, what does happen in the organization? And that is where the leadership support and buy-in comes in, because unless it starts from the top, everything that we would try to enable as HR practitioners will not succeed. And
No,
that's
absolutely.
that's the biggest grudge that most HR people come up with, saying, "यार इतना सब कर दिया and आगे ही नहीं जा रहा है." And you yourself
Mm.
start feeling, and that's where the fear comes in again, the frustration part about
No,
what
absolutely. And
success.
you're bang on there, Brilliant. There would be no organization today that does not plan for succession planning, right? There would be no organization today that would want to languish in a space where a particular critical role is not fulfilled. and that too internally, right? So
Yes.
that's a given. That's a given today that, okay, this needs to happen. But then there are roadblocks. And that's exactly where you came in, right? When we say leadership buy-in or leadership alignment, in most cases, you will find the buy-in is there. The alignment is there. Where are we falling short? The investment is not coming in, right?
Yep.
And it's not just an investment of intent. It's real investment. It's the real money, right? Because you need to have patience when you're building talent. You need to give money when you're building talent. So somewhere, do you think that is where a lot of organizations hit a roadblock? That yes, intent hai, buy-in bhi hai, but investment nahi hai, which is where it is getting stuck.
Yeah, and I think that's where what I love to share is intent is good, but how you are moving from intent to action
To
is
action.
what makes the difference, right?
Absolutely.
The beauty of everything is in the execution.
No,
Until and
absolutely.
unless you get in there, it doesn't help. And I think organizations at times feel a bit restricted. So,
Hmm.
especially in organizations which do not really have a strong structural framework, for example, they will find it as a
Yes.
challenge. They'll say, "यार क्यों invest करना है? क्या फर्क पड़ता है?" That
Hmm.
mindset of क्या फर्क पड़ता है can create a bigger dent for the organization, because what we don't realize as leaders and as HR practitioners is the gap that is created by a void for a leader in a critical role could be 5x of your revenues, 5x of your
Absolutely.
profitability.
Right on.
If
Hmm.
someone within the company had stepped in, I'm not saying you would have achieved 5x, you would have at least achieved 1x, 2x, whatever. As
Absolutely.
a typical business community says, profit ma loss, loss ma profit, whatever you want to call it, right? You want to look at how you reduce your losses.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
cutting losses is one of the, I would say, primary ownership that every leader should start thinking of. And unless you have that built in your company, it will not help.
Hmm.
It's like penny wise pound foolish kind of a story. You are not
No,
wanting to invest in the long term and say nahi yaar
exactly.
kyun karu main, and then you realize the folly of saying, oh man, I missed by this mark, and then everyone suffers because of one mistake.
True that, true that. And the fun part is that while we as HR practitioners love to take ownership of this, but HR alone, HR with all the right intent cannot be driving something which is so intrinsic to business, right? Because if business does not realize that these are my critical roles and I cannot not have them fulfilled, whether internally, externally, yes, of course, but if I have a chance to make a robust system so that I can do it internally, if business does not realize the importance of business, then HR cannot be that facilitator who can take it forward. This is something which I keep talking about whenever I meet business representatives, really.
Absolutely right.
There are some HR practitioners in the room today. So Vigneshwari, I can see Priyanka. Any thoughts you guys have on this as to does HR feel restricted when it comes to driving a few of these things? Y'all can put it on chat. You can speak whichever way you would want to express, or
Badass
anybody
निकाल दो,
else.
बड़ास निकाल लो, opportunity है.
Any thoughts that, yes, we feel this is a great idea. We know that it needs to be done, but business buy-in becomes a deterrent for us.
Now, while we wait for them to probably put it on chat or unmute, something happened yesterday, and I was doing a start of an opening session, which was more on mental wellness. And one of the activities that I was doing was grounding, which means that you settle in. And I just started off by saying that by nature or
Hmm.
forced by business, HR is always grounded. So,
I don't know how many of us are feeling thrilled about that definition, but yes, sort of. Yes, I agree. I'm not seeing any questions yet, I'll just move to the last part of the conversation. On a Friday evening, I wouldn't want to hold back people beyond
There.
7:45. And Brilliant was very strict about telling me, "यार Friday evening है, 7:45 तक उसके आगे नहीं जाना है." So, but this is very critical, and which is why I want to spend 2-3 minutes on this,
Sure.
Brilliant. You had briefly touched upon it in a different context, though. But here I would want to further contextualize it towards the actual steps we take in building our leaders, right? And you mentioned that how much of coaching are we really doing, right?
Yeah.
And how am I enabling my managers? And it starts from a level of a manager. How am
True.
I enabling my manager to behave like a coach? That is one. Am I teaching him? Because, these are all 20 plus somethings which become managers these days. This is not the era where manager बनने के लिए 10 साल लगते हैं, right? You're out from your biz school and you're a manager, right? You're
True.
there.
True.
You are managing people. Now, one is, what are organizations doing to enable the managers to become coaches? And two is, do you think now in the West, it's a well established tool, right? Coaching is a well established tool in most parts of the West and in others. In India, do you think we are taking small steps forward, or do you think there is a long way to go in actually using coaching as an enabler for leaders? Because how else does a leader learn, right? Whether we're doing coaching, mentoring, whichever format it might be. But how else am I enabling that person at the top to whom everybody's looking up to, right? But how is that person getting enabled? So there are two parts to this question. How are the first level managers, right? How are we enabling them as coaches or in coaching techniques, really? Because they're not going to become coaches per se as a profession, but then in nature they would have to exhibit a lot of those abilities which a coach does. And for the top level, how much of ground have we covered, you think, in terms of using coaching as an effective tool to enable those layers?
Yeah. Thank you for that, Nilakshi. And it starts with the biggest eye opener for all of us. And this is based on experience. We did attempt to bring in coaching to some of the leaders. And guess what was the first aspect that came in? मुझे coaching की जरूरत नहीं है.
It's
And
almost like therapy. मुझे therapy की जरूरत
yeah,
नहीं है.
and it's like they felt as if it's being compared to being put on a PIP. And I had to actually sit down and give them a run through of saying why we are looking at it.
Touche.
And when we had that experience of building that coaching exercise for some of the identified leaders, it also emerged that they were not aware about what the organization wanted and was thinking about them. The
Mm,
self awareness itself was very low, right?
absolutely.
End of it, what really helped was beyond the coach, I had to sit with the person and I have to run that person through in terms of saying, it's okay. And you should be happy that you have a coach, because in India, if we look at it today, less than X% has coaches assigned. And if it were to me, I would definitely love to have a coach, because
Mm,
sometimes you need that guiding person there during that particular phase of your career.
absolutely.
It is
Absolutely.
critical. So, from a India landscape perspective, I think we have huge scope and potential. I think by virtue of the number of coaches that we see who are getting certified, I think there are more number of coaches than the number of coaches
Then a
today.
number of
So,
coaches. Mm,
so we
absolutely.
need to flip that and say, okay, every coach at least gets one coachee to coach and work on. But organizations are getting there. Some organizations that I know of have started small by saying, you know what, we need to target this. And the
Mm,
best thing is, it's not starting at the top. They are saying that we need to start looking
you're right.
at managers, right?
You're right. You're right.
Because it
And
starts
that's a
from
brilliant
there.
step
Because
forward.
it's like, setting that ground for your success and your future. In one of the aspects that we were looking at for first time managers program was to bring in an element of how to be a good coach,
Yes.
and this was not something which we used to have earlier.
Mm.
Now we know that it's critical, and it's a given, right? It doesn't matter who you are, and we
No,
don't
no,
need to have
amazing,
a
amazing.
certificate to
That's
be a
that's very
coach.
encouraging. Yes, I mean, if you've been there, done that, you have the basic elements of leadership, and you can envision empathy as one of the key components towards your style, then I
True.
think you can be a coach to the person. So we have two questions, Brilliant.
Yeah.
We first go to Priyanka. She had put in a question on the chat. So I'll just open up the chat, and then we have Vigneshwari with her hands up. So we'll go to Vigneshwari as well. So Priyanka has asked, I think managers to be coached to be their team's first HR. Yes, give some tips. Brilliant. Absolutely great question. I think this is what we
Yeah.
were really talking about, that
True.
how do our managers become coaches?
Yeah. The first step is, as I mentioned, making them aware that HR is not a function. It's a way of life, right?
Yes,
It's about people. It's about people who you work with.
yes.
Just imagine it's like your mother in an organization. For a metaphorical lessons, what happens when child has fever? She will not run to the doctor immediately. She has घर के नुस्खे which she will pick up and say, okay, चलो पहले पट्टी लगा लो, ये check कर लो. The idea is, as a manager, you need to build those skills. And when you realize that, okay, it's not within your control, that's when you reach out to high level experts, maybe HR or beyond that, external coaches. But it starts with helping them understand the importance of coaching to support your employees, to
That's
support
right.
your team members, because
Mm.
it's not only just about growth, but it's about outcomes. It's about, as you said, building that empathy within there. And what we have observed is managers who display those skills, while it's not officially called as coaching, but those skills where they take care of people, they understand what it is. The success rate in terms of outcomes that they achieve is far better than anyone else.
Absolutely.
And that's
Absolutely.
that's like saying that I am now aligned towards what core HR is. And I think what the business expects HR to be business partners, so HR expects business to be HR partners. And I
Absolutely.
think that kind of a synergy should be there in terms of building it in. So be it providing the right kind of ecosystem. As an organization, I would say don't worry about curating a big format program.
That's right.
Think about ways and means through which you can get those managers. I'm saying you do a program for 50 people, even if two of them become exceptional coaches. I think your job of making that as a part of your culture is successful. Then use them as success stories and say, hey, you know what?
Exactly.
I'm using it. So somewhere it needs to come in from beyond the just tick mark activity that we've been doing for a very long time and make it a way of life. That's what I think, Priyanka.
Absolutely. Absolutely. To add to what you were saying, Brilliant, there was a time in my life when I was heading a pretty large BPO as a head of HR, right? And you would know, as would the rest of us all here, that in a BPO, a 20 plus something comes and manages 20 people,
Yeah,
right? A team leader
team leader.
manages 20 people,
Yeah,
and their performances are revenue for the organization, right? Now, there was this one quick check I used to do every time we used to have retention meetings, right? Because retention is a very, very big thing in BPOs, because
true.
you're training people, you're putting them on the seat, they start to earn revenue and they leave for 2,000 rupees, right? Now,
Yeah,
this is where the manager, which is the team leader, plays this humongous role in terms of retaining these people. And that's where their first stepping stone of being a coach really begins. The first thing I would ask these boys and girls who themselves were like 23, 25, 26 at max, that अच्छा पहला चीज ये मेरा white board है, अपने सारे बंदों के नाम लिख, 1 to 20, please write all the names of your people. Okay. Now tell me, what are their phone numbers? Do you have everybody's phone number on your phone? I don't mean on your system, on your phone. Who was and Brilliant, trust you me, there would be enough number of these managers who we expect to be coaches who are responsible for these 20 people. They couldn't move beyond 6 names.
yeah,
कि अच्छा अभी याद नहीं आ रहा है, हाँ पर है तो सही, पर अभी याद नहीं आ रहा है. Now
true.
that, Priyanka, is not a usual industry scenario. This is very specific to BPOs and KPOs. But having said so, if you want to really train managers to become coaches, they first have to know their people really, really well. There cannot be apathy towards your people in terms of, okay, he is just a team member. You need to know who is there in the family. You need to know what he likes doing. Then is, of course, there are certain other skills which you obviously need to build. But knowing your people becomes very, very important if you really want to act as a coach to them.
And just to
Vigneshwari,
add, just
yeah.
before we get to Vignesh, I happened to visit a contact center today on some different purpose, and actually we realized that it's a contact center, and it was so motivating to see maybe a 25-year-old just with a whiteboard and names and trying to say, Sabash, Sabash, Raju, Shaheen, come on, you just need to do this. And you felt as if you are in a sports arena, and
Yes,
the energy there was so contagious. And
absolutely.
it's like two team leaders trying to motivate their teams. So you understand
Amazing.
what motivates, and there's this third person who goes, keeps a hand on the shoulder of this guy and says, "क्या हो गया? चल चल हो जाएगा." Right?
That's such a
Understanding
simplistic way
people.
of showing it, na? I mean, imagine,
Yeah,
Brilliant, how many times do we do that, really? As you keep growing up the ladder, how many times do we actually do that?
we
But yeah,
have
that's
to.
such a fantastic way of explaining this. Vigneshwari, you've been waiting for a while. Tell us.
Yeah. So, hi Nilakshi, hi Brian. So my question is just a thought process. I'm working in HR like from past 8.5 years now, and I've been working with automotive industry also, and also a service based industry. So usually, what challenge we face when it comes to coaching the leaders is a major thing which I see is a generation gap, wherein these leaders, as Brilliant said, um, मुझे सब आता है, so that kind of the know it all kind of approach they have. Why do I need a training and all that? So how to tackle with such leaders wherein we have to make them understand about this coaching is important, just to create a awareness, just to accepting the change, and how they can cater their team members in a right way to follow the proper procedures and protocols. Because I have seen so many managers when I go and tell them कि सर आपको ही ट्रेनिंग करानी है, नहीं हमें ट्रेनिंग की जरूरत नहीं है. So they give such kind of reply. So convincing those HODs who are at the very top level. So what you suggest? What approach we can take on this?
So thanks, Vigneshwari, for that question. So let me just, put it in a different perspective. The moment you go and tell someone that you need this, they will always have barriers in front saying, "नहीं नहीं मुझे नहीं चाहिए." You need to be like generation whatever is active today, alpha, I think, right? Where
Yes,
they,
that's the current one.
that's the current one, where they create a sense of FOMO, which is the fear of missing out, and saying that agar tumne ye nahi kiya na, so you're not there. So I learn so much from my 12-year-old son, where he keeps coming and telling me this, and sometimes I ask, iska matlab kya hai? Now, I don't want to be left out, because that's the way it is tackled effectively. The moment we start to go out and tell them that तुम्हें इसकी जरूरत है, they will put that barrier and say no. Make it as, I would say, an aspirational element.
Aspirational,
Hmm.
Make it
absolutely.
aspirational. Make it, I would say, think beyond, right? Don't use the word coaching or mentoring. You just say that, sir, आप इनके साथ जरा बात करके देख लो, कुछ अलग ही बात कर रहा है.
Hmm.
Maybe,
Hmm. Hmm.
some conversations which you would love. I still remember I was having you know uh, double thoughts about having a conversation with someone who comes in from a very different kind of an industry, and I said, yaar nahi yaar, ekdam typical cliched hoga. But the moment I sat with that person, what emerged was the uh, depth and the intensity with which the person was working in that domain, and
Uh,
the kind of value that person would bring in. But from the outside it would say, नहीं यार ये domain में से हमारे लिए क्या फर्क पड़ता है. So it's like saying that you don't want to mix let's say peanuts and cashew nuts, but it's important to understand the importance that the peanut brings in, and how it can probably blend up and be the poor man's cashew nut. How do you make
Yeah.
it effective? That's
Yeah.
yes.
that's the duty that you would have, Vigneshwari. Instead of trying to push it across, I would say create that pull factor through
Hmm.
the way in which you put it across. More than the what you want to do, it's how you do it that makes a big difference.
Correct. I think we have to be more strategically, smarty pants to get the things done.
Absolutely.
Totally,
Yes.
totally, totally. No,
Yeah. Thank
absolutely.
you.
And that was a wonderful question. And as usual, Brilliant has this brilliant take on every question that comes his way. So thank you
Thank.
so much. I think
Thank you.
I've outrun my time by 10 minutes, so we shall keep it a pause here unless anybody else has any other question. But yeah, I'll take a quick 30 seconds pause to see if there are any other questions. Else we'll call it a day. All right. So thank you so much, Brilliant, for that
My
wonderful
pleasure.
participation and your investment towards learning. You know, that's the most
Thank you.
important. If you have be ready with yourself to give us an hour at 7 o'clock on a Friday, that speaks much more about the culture you
Thank you.
might be leading in your organization, and that kind of really enlightens most of us as to how to behave in this environment, right? VUCA or not, we know how to behave in this environment when we see investment from HR leaders like you. So thank you so much.
Thank you so
And
much.
thank you, Shagun. Back
Thank you
to
so
you.
much. So we can thank you everybody for joining, and thank you, Brilliant, for such an
Pleasure.
engaging discussion.